Miss Rimmicky had not been looking forward to this particular lesson. She knew that, eventually, once she had worn out all of the cultural aspects of humanity, their vehicles, clothing, and whatnot, someone was going to ask about biology. The day before, one of the more annoying optician had broached the subject at the end of the lesson, and the entire class had rallied behind her. To be fair, she was something of an expert on some forms of human biology, though she wasn't going to be bringing that up in class. Miss Rimmicky blinked awake with bleary, slitted eyes as the alarm clock went off next to her bedside table. It was a classic model GE alarm clock, a relic from the bygone 1990s of Earth. They were remaking them, part of an ode to the classics renaissance that was currently taking over most of the countries on Earth. She frankly hated it. It made a loud, skin-crawling klaxon-type noise when the chosen time had arrived, and it made her instantly snap awake. This was the first of many things she found odd about humans. They did not automatically wake up. Nearly every alien race she could think of had a natural alarm within their brains, a survival mechanism that allowed them to wake up at the perfect time they desired, as their internal clocks ran like a well-oiled machine. The internal clocks of humans, however, ran like a bicycle that was missing a wheel. "Caden, the alarm," Miss Rimmicky said groggily, her face pinching as the little clock kept rattling her skull with each beep. It was amazing that, despite the rather sensitive ears of humans, they could sleep through both alarms, car accidents, explosions, and possibly entire war zones. "Caden," Miss Rimmicky whined, looking down at her side to the human male clinging to her. Humans, oddly enough, loved things to be cold when they slept, or at least a very high average. No one had any idea why, as all aliens loved their rooms warm and cozy, yet humans would happily turn a room down to nearly 62 degrees UAS Fahrenheit and then cuddle under a blanket. Caden was no different. Even now, he clung to her like he was trying to grapple her into submission, one muscled leg tossed over her thighs, and an arm wrapped around her ribcage. Miss Rimmicky, being a Zamra, needed heat to stay warm, and was normally quite chilled on space stations because they were rarely warm enough. Caden couldn't sleep when the room was warm, so they instead had a thick comforter, something the humans called a duvet. Miss Rimmicky could stay quite warm under the blanket, but Caden was like her personal space heater. Humans produced a ton of body heat, likely the reason why they liked to sleep so cold, and Miss Rimmicky was like a heat sink for Caden. This led to their usual morning of tangled limbs, as well as Miss Rimmicky having to drag the rather flirtatious hands of Caden away. Miss Rimmicky never failed to laugh every morning when she had to untangle herself from Caden and lightly swat his hands away. Humans were the only sentient race that could be aroused no matter the time of day. Nearly everyone else in the Confederation had to be fully awake, fed, watered, and active for at least 3 to 4 hours before any kind of amorous awakenings came into play. Humans? Humans didn't even have to be awake for their motor to be running. Many star citizens that studied humans had a deep belief that this was the reason for their constantly expanding population. This odd trait had been the downfall of Miss Rimmicky several times this week alone, speed-walking her way to class after having to re-shower and refresh herself before being in front of her students. It's no fault of her own, as she had a very strong will, even for the Zamra. The downfall came in the form of human pheromones. Humans were the most pheromone-laden in the mornings as the body rests, and this has been so commonplace that not even the humans seem to notice it anymore after the hundreds of thousands of years in their evolution. This meant that all citizens of the stars, including Miss Rimmicky, awoke to a pheromone-laden room every morning, something that scared the absolute sense out of some races while arousing others. Some star citizens that evolved from prey animals are snapped awake with the desire to run and hide, overwhelmed by the smell of a predator next to them and swamping the entire bedroom. Others that evolved from predators find their heart beating fast and mind racing, but for a whole other reason. It takes almost 5 months for a star citizen to acclimate to a human mate, though male star citizens who pal around with female humans find their mornings extremely uncomfortable. There was even a code gleaned from these occurrences, as male star citizens will phone into work to say, "An extra 5 will do," to let their bosses know they need a little more time to calm down. Caden, again, was no different, and may have even been a little worse. As he reached over and slapped the alarm till it was quiet, he rubbed his face into her shoulder, squeezing her tighter with his arms and legs. "Mornin', my little dragon queen." Miss Rimmicky narrowed her sleepy eyes, then reached over and placed her large clawed hand against Caden's forehead. "No," Caden just chuckled, kissing her shoulder and then her neck. "No, Caden." Miss Rimmicky giggled, using the extra height and weight she had on Caden to push back against his forehead, allowing her to wiggle free of him and the bed. "I cannot be late again, and you are the sole reason why I usually am." Caden sighed from the bed, still partially cocooned in blankets, and leaned up onto a strong hand, as his blonde hair fell down around his face in bed-headed ringlets. "That's fine. Just means I get to watch you go." Miss Rimmicky looked over her shoulder, raising a scaled eye-ridge at him. Her heart gave a soft flutter as she caught sight of the morning light emitters casting his pale skin in a soft glow, but a sharp click caught her attention from the living room bar. If it wasn't for the coffee maker gurgling to life and reminding her she had a job to do, she would have been lured back into bed by the little love predator. Speaking of coffee, humans were caffeine junkies through and through. While slipping on a pair of jeans and a sweater, Miss Rimmicky inhaled slowly and dragged in the caressing scent of roasted coffee beans. Human biology was rigorous, allowing them to consume a litany of poisons and stimulants that only served to fill them with jittery energy or get them high out of their minds. Coffee was a stimulant that humans had a high command of, and was likely one of the few reasons why Earth was as filthy rich as it was. Coffee, no matter how hard they tried, could only be grown on Earth. Scientists were dumbfounded and enraged that they could not get the plants to grow, and even the Nimiki were perplexed at the finicky little plant. The desire of the coffee bean elevated the countries of South America to a power on par with the unified American states and the European coalition, and were being courted by the UAS into joining. Fields upon fields of coffee plants ran all along the bean belt, as it was called, and Earth had a stranglehold on its production and market value. Miss Rimmicky loved coffee, as did all Zumra, the darker the better, and it never failed to perk her up. The same could not be said of the Yorpal and Carlakins, who, despite loving the flavor of coffee, could only handle a single cup of light roast. They tended to get the jitters quite easily, but that simply meant they got more bang for their buck through a single cup. Unlike the Zumra and Poit, if a Yorpal or Carlakin ingested too much coffee, they had extreme intestinal distress, which sometimes even led to death. As Miss Rimmicky took a sip from her coffee-filled canister, she felt the strong arms of Caden slowly wrap around her waist, resting on her wide hips. "Dragon in a sweater," Caden murmured. Miss Rimmicky snorted and slapped at his hands. "No, stars above. How are you this active without even being fully awake?" She pulled out a long stirring spoon, reaching past her side and jabbing Caden in his toned stomach. "Back, beast. Back to the dungeon from which you came." The irony was not lost on Caden, nor was it lost on her, as they both giggled and laughed, Miss Rimmicky jabbing Caden with a long spoon and herding him into the bathroom so he would shower. She escaped the lair that was her hab unit with plenty of time to spare, having fended off Caden. She arrived at her classroom well before her students and started setting up the course for the day. She had to get a little creative, as she knew what kinds of questions those little bastards were going to ask. But she had to steel herself. She was halfway through her canister when the first students arrived, and as per usual, it was the yellow Yorpal Ramira and the black Yorpal Tintel. "Good morning," Miss Rimmicky said, nodding to them with a light wave of her fronds. Tintel grinned. "You're in for a rough one today, Teach. I wouldn't be surprised if you end up brain zapping a few people within the first hour." The entire class was huddled around in the cantina for hours after class, coming up with questions to ask you. Ramira said with a roll of her eyes, pulling up her own cantina stir that was full of a carrot juice blend. I hope you weren't planning to have a good day. Miss Rimmicky tilted her head, sighing out with coffee-warmed breath. Oh, goody. You two go ahead and have a seat then. I'm sure they'll all arrive at once, prattling away like songbirds. My sister told me about the birds. Ramira mused, fluffing out her butter-yellow head fur before taking a seat near the front. Is it true they sing with the sunrise? Farron always says they do. All birds make noise with the sunrise, Ramira, Tintle murmured, sitting down next to her. Ramira chuckled. Our birds just scream. Earth birds sing. Why can't we discuss fun things like that today? I have an entire... Miss Rimmicky began, but let out a sigh as the two Yorple gave her knowing looks. They would riot, wouldn't they? Mm-hmm. The two Yorple hummed together, and Miss Rimmicky just shook her head. She had just finished up the commands for her slides when the rest of the class arrived, and there was a tangible tension to the air as they all sat down, quiet for the first time since she had taught the class. Oh, you lot are keen, aren't you? Miss Rimmicky drawled out dryly, standing up from her desk and smoothing down her jeans. She liked jeans, and these were quite advanced, made with some materials called spandex. I bet you've been looking forward to this for months, haven't you? The only reply she received was the widening smiles from her students, except for the masked Jinn, who just gave her a cheery thumbs up with one of their forearms. Splendid. Miss Rimmicky hiss-growled to herself, then tapped the pad of her finger to the thick muscle of her thumb. The large display came alive, sporting an image of human men and women of various skin colors playing volleyball. The cheer that the students let out was deafening, and everyone but Tintle and Ramira were tagged with a spike of pain as Miss Rimmicky focused her will upon her students. The two Yorple knew it was coming and had smartly kept their mouths shut. That is more than enough. Thank you. You will all show proper decorum in my class, regardless of the subject, Miss Rimmicky stated firmly, her tail whacking against her desk angrily. Collectively, the class all held a hand or claw to their head, murmuring angrily to those seated beside them as Miss Rimmicky took her place in front of them all. So, all of you want to know the biology of humans. I mean to teach you about it in a highly professional manner, so I expect professional questions from you as well. Miss Rimmicky began, then gestured towards the screen. Humans, as stated before, evolved from a predator race. This in turn has given them a muscular build familiar to other predators, such as the Zumra, Yorple, and Carlaken. Humans require movement and exercise to stay healthy, as without it, they can gain weight and lose their form. Miss Rimmicky tapped her thumb again, going to the next slide showing a pair of extremely overweight humans trundling along a park walkway. Like all races, they are prone to weight gain if they consume too many calories and do not work them off. Similarly, they have many body types, ranging from short to extremely tall. Miss Rimmicky tapped to the next slide, showing a cluster of humans of many sizes. They can be as naturally short as 4'6" to over 7 feet tall in UAS units. They can be taller or shorter, but this is normally related to certain diseases, such as dwarfism and gigantism. A powder blue female Yorple raised a pawed hand, and Miss Rimmicky raised her scaled brow ridges to her. Yes? The Yorple leaned in towards her fellow students, heads nodding as they spoke. Then she brought her hand down. What is the human miasma? Of course. Miss Rimmicky whispered to herself, but she let out a controlled breath as she put her teacher voice back on. That is a pheromone, released by humans as they sleep. Humans themselves are not affected by it, or at least not as much as other races of the Confederation. This pheromone causes different reactions, depending on the legacy of the race. Prey races will react in fear when they smell this pheromone, and it has been compared to a musk. The Poit, Jinn, and Nimiki so far have had the worst reaction to this pheromone, as they have awoken or have been filled with a blind panic, running from the room where the pheromone is present and then hiding. The pheromone overrides their logical senses and draws out something far more animal from the mind, and it takes time to acclimate to having a human around. Miss Rimmicky tapped her fingers along her hand, pulling up an image of a human snoozing in a hammock. That being said, the pheromone has been found even when they are simply sleeping, and naps have caused a fair bit of chaos on ships.
What does it do to, not prey races?
The powder blue Yorple said quietly, tapping the ends of her claws together.
Out of curiosity.
Miss Rimmicky had a notion to give the Yorple's brain another zap, but instead shrugged it off and kept her professional air. For non-prey races, it has been described as energizing. She had to take a few deep breaths herself, as her brain brought the same feelings to the front of her memory, and she felt her skin tingle lightly. It can cause the heart to race, the blood to rush within veins, and the brain to spin to life so quickly that it has been able to jerk a star citizen awake from a dead sleep. It causes the stomach to flutter, the skin to sweat, if it can, that is, and for an unusual arousal to take you. To many who came from predators, it can make you feel alive in a way you have never known before. There was an audible intake of air as those of such a legacy drew in an excited breath, while there was a vibration of excited fear from those with a prey legacy. Oh, good grief, Miss Rimmicky thought to herself, then went back to her slides of humans. Anyway, humans are extremely well muscled if they take even the bare minimum of care to themselves. Due to their lack of fur, scales, or anything else of that nature, their strength is in raw display in their many forms of body. She changed the slides to a larger one, showing a male and female of 3 accepted forms of human body at their weak, middling, and peak. First, we have what many of us call the triangle human, Miss Rimmicky said, ignoring the many low whistles and giggles from her students. This standard of human is by far the most abundant and have a very defined musculature. They are the most well-rounded of the humans, having a balance of muscle, fat, and height. The second are what we call oval humans. Miss Rimmicky changed the slide to show a male and female of this type, and there was an interesting reaction to a lot of the students. Some of them had eyes wide with fear, while the eyes of others were wide for a far different reason, some of them even smiling. Oval humans have a higher tendency to store fat, have more muscle, and are just wider. These are quite common and are normally found where things need lifting on a daily basis. Ovals and triangles are at a constant war with each other, which has been compared to tribalistic bickering on who is actually the strongest, who looks better, etc. They are usually the slowest of the humans, excelling at sprinting but failing at longer distances, purely due to their weight. Then there are the rectangle humans. Miss Rimmicky said, changing the slide once again. Well, they look rather friendly. A male poet said, having been taking notes the entire time. Miss Rimmicky smiled. Quite. Rectangle humans are athletic, maybe even more so than the triangle humans, and have trouble building muscle or fat due to how their body functions. They are lean, quick, and agile, and dominate many sports that do not require as much strength as others. Human muscle is extremely dense with tightly woven strands of corded muscle. How dense and strong it is up to debate, but there are things we saw during the Daramir War that still have us questioning many things. She tapped at her thumb, pulling up a slightly blurred image of a human ripping a Daramir warrior in half, and there was an audible gasp from the classroom as Miss Rimmicky smoothed down her sweater. It appears that humans are kept in measure. That is to say, their immense strength is held in check naturally by their brain, and we believe they only do this as a means to, well, maintain their caloric needs. All of us use 100% of our musculature to its fullest extent. This much is known and accepted. Humans, as recorded and studied, only use up to 70% of their actual potential strength. Human women have been filmed lifting entire vehicles off of offspring with something called hysterical strength, all by themselves, and warriors have been known to go berserk during the war, ripping their enemy in two or just tearing the limbs from Daramir warriors. The Daramir have not been the only victims to human strength that is left unchecked when engaged in fight or flight. Humans that choose fight can produce terrifying amounts of strength. More roguish races like the Dokwi and Don Shirema have been found equally dismembered, crushed, or outright broken by humans they tried to rob. Even now, the Mandarains are finding themselves shocked at fighting humans in melee combat, as well as their immense strength when their adrenaline is pumping in their blood. After such a display of strength, the human body has consumed a ridiculous amount of energy and will crash a few hours later. Human warriors have been stumbled upon asleep on the battlefield, pushing themselves to the brink and then promptly passing out. The class was quite silent, staring at the still blurry image in horror and awe. Miss Rimiki perked up her voice a bit, going to a new slide. On a lighter note, one thing that all humans share is their ability to generate a substantial amount of body heat. Their bodies run so hot that most bacteria and viruses are cooked alive with the body itself. And only the localized microfauna of Earth even have a chance to infiltrate their bodies. This is also why many of us have to take injections regularly, and why the Optican have to ingest nano-scrubbers to make sure our bodies do not fall victim to earthen pathogens.
Is that why we are constantly getting pumped with med tabs?
Ajin asked shakily, raising two of her hands past her mask modeled after an earthen wolf. She had to steady herself from the earlier revelation.
I feel like I have gotten more injections on this station than I have in my entire life.
Miss Rimiki nodded. It is a requirement, I am afraid. Humans are extremely steadfast little buggers when it comes to infections, and they have bred some of the fiercest microfauna to ever reach the stars. We have a sturdy grasp on medical science, and it is the only reason why humans have not released a dozen plagues onto other planets. It got close a few times after the smallpox outbreak on Station Palpable, but thankfully the fatalities were low due to the hard work of medical professionals on the station itself. Many believe humans run hot to kill anything that gets inside of them, and stay hot to make sure they do not go down. Miss Rimiki tapped at her thumb muscle while her students all murmured to each other, pulling up an image of a human woman sleeping on her bed. As stated before, humans tend to release pheromones when they sleep, but they do not just sleep at night like most of us. Carlake and sleeping during the day on their home planet, as we all know. Humans run hot all through the day, and even with proper calories, they may feel a need to catch what they call cat naps, a quick snooze to empower their body and rest their brain. Curiously, no other race is able to do this. Even we, Zamra. When we sleep, and will not wake until we have completed a full cycle. As a matter of fact, the only creatures known to be able to nap all reside on Earth. A small rodent-type creature from Yulon will not be able to nap like a small rodent-type creature from Earth, and instead stay awake until they sleep. Further theorized is this being a key component to human dominance on the battlefield. When tired, they can take a quick nap and be back on their feet within hours. The Daramir had to complete full cycles and would even try and force themselves to stay awake in order to combat humans, whom they knew were resting and getting ready to assault them. This led to the Daramir being exhausted by the time the humans hit their lines, unable to nap, and instead trying to stave off their already long-due sleep cycle.
Are you of trying to say their superpower is of microsleeping?
A male Optican asked, his brown feathered head tilted in confusion.
What is a nap of feeling like?
You can find out if you intake some human pheromones, Miss Rimiki said with a wink, and the class erupted into laughter and guffaws. A female Carelacan hissed out in a giggle, then held out her hands, palms up.
You cannot be serious, Miss Rimiki.
I'm quite serious, Miss Rimiki said with a smile. The only times other races have been able to experience a nap is when they are near other napping human. Of course, they have to combat all the other feelings that may arise, but if they master themselves, they can experience a short sleeping cycle, or the human nap.
If they like sleeping so much, why do they ingest so many stimulants?
The female Carlaken asked, resting her lizard-like head on her clawed hands. Miss Rimmicky tapped at her palm until the slide of a human drinking coffee came onto the screen, and only she knew it was Caden. It is a fair question, and frankly, the only answer we have is that they like it. Humans, for whatever reason, love ingesting poisons, stimulants, and minerals that make them perk up or feel different ways. We had all thought the Nimiki were the deviants around us, but humans put them to shame. Caffeine, sugar, nicotine, alcohol, cannabinoids, cocaine, opium, capsaicin. Humans ingest them all. They may want to flavor foods, feel more alert, disassociate, or just sit on the couch and eat junk food. Humans are some of the most prolific junkies currently cruising the stars, and their bodies are so robust that they can even ingest stimulants from other races with ease. Miss Rimmicky was about to go on listing some of the more favored human stimulants when a raised hand caught her eye, and she turned. Yes? What is it?
I just got an alert that there's going to be a station emergency drill here in about 20 minutes or so, and those always take forever. Before we have to end class early, can we know? You know,
a female point said, running the pad of her finger along the tabletop.
The fun question? You know, what we're going to ask? You know, about the rumors?
Miss Rimmicky tried to play dumb, raising her scaled eyebrow ridges again and tilting her head. Rumors? About their mating rituals? A male Yorple spoke up. The lengths they go, how they have affected the Confederation, how it made the Zumra rather angry, and why Yorples are taking human mates at— Yes, all right, Miss Rimmicky said, holding up her hands with a flare of her head fronds. I know what you're asking. However, before I pull up the slides, all of you will be on your best behavior. Got it? A chorus of silent, nodding heads replied to her, and she queued up the slides. One was of a rather buxom female human wearing lingerie, the other a strapping male human wearing only shorts, both of them giving the class an eye that the humans were already well known for. The class itself was very quiet, though they were reacting in their own way. The fur of the Yorples floofed out a fair margin, the hoods of the Carlaken coming forward in an embarrassed manner to try and shield their faces, and the point all blushed, bringing freckles up onto their skin. The Optican were the most pronounced, their feathers poofing out in embarrassment, while the Jinn were calm and cool, though their fingers did fidget with their masks. Humans are predators, and they like to hunt, in all manner of ways. When not in combat, humans become predators of affection. Their body language not only changes, but it is subtle. For the most part, all of us are so advanced that we are quite cordial with each other and openly display our affections with words. The humans are quite behind us, technically, and they wage a different kind of war, one that could be called biological. Miss Rimmicky began, and she kept taking in deep breaths in order to keep herself calm. She hated how she got when talking about this subject, but all it did was make her think of Caden. Humans bring out the worst in us, and sadly the Zumra the most. A popular human saying is, all is fair in love and war, and they are just as adept in one field as they are the other. Miss Rimmicky set the slides to slowly rotate through a section of 50, showing different aspects of human courtship. It could be said that they operate on a biological level, taking advantage of natural responses to touch, taste, sight, and even hearing. The Zumra fell as easy prey to touch and body language, which infuriated Zumra leadership for reasons we already know. There is also a new issue with male and female Zumra smuggling themselves to Earth, but that is not part of this lesson. The most obvious is sight. Humans will initiate emotional combat with pure body language. They will narrow the eyes, smile, grin, and have a deep command of their eyelids and eyebrows. Confederation scholars believe that half of the human language is silent, derived from the eyebrows and eyelids alone. There are also their fingers, Miss Rimmicky said, fighting to not smile. Humans will initiate touch in ways that none of us could even understand, having left that kind of communication behind centuries ago. A light touch to the shoulder, a finger to the chin or lips, the subtle caress of a hip. Hundreds of star citizens have fallen as eager prey to human touch alone. By some way, They know exactly how to touch, caress, stroke, or brush us to elicit a reaction. How they know this, no one is sure, but it appears to be innate, as if they can see us at a feral level and understand how to get the response they want out of us. A few certain scholars believe that human flesh is biologically weaponized, as human skin is quite unique with its ridges, and many consider it to actually be a weapon. The Yorpal, Zumra, Karlakan, and Optican are the most affected by this. It has been so much of a problem that humans are not allowed to touch these races while on some stations, as it is an actual fear that they may accidentally seduce a star citizen without intending to. Even firm handshakes and eye contact have smitten some officials, leaving them a twitter and causing them to become soft-hearted in negotiations. Furthermore, humans will engage in psychological warfare for affections. They will buy you small gifts that have meaning to you, and they will hug you, a form of intimacy where a human will wrap their arms around you and normally clasps the hands. Miss Rummicky said, pointing to the display. These are dangerous for more than one reason. One, once they have you, you cannot get away. By all means, try and get away from a human who has their arms around you. You will find it difficult, Miss Rummicky said, stifling a giggle from what she had to do that very morning. Hugs have meanings. A simple hug from the front in the diagonal is how friends usually greet each other. However, if the hug goes horizontal, either around the waist or neck, that means the human likes you more than a friend and have likely marked you as prey. A hug from the side is also a friendly gesture as long as it is around the shoulders, but should that hug travel south, you are marked as well. The most dangerous hug is one from behind, as no matter where those arms go, it is a display of more carnal or deep affection, and these are normally only administered to those whom they consider a mate in some way. As her students were all furiously taking notes, she kept speaking. Do note these hugs work in the same way on humans. If you hug a human around the neck or waist from the front, you are telling that human that you see them as a potential mate, and they will treat you in kind if they are interested. This can be quite awkward if they are not interested, and the humans are quite good at making that known in a kind manner. The most dangerous is a hug from behind. If you hug a human from behind and have not built up that level of trust and affection, it is no different than hugging an earthen bear from behind. You have a good chance of being mauled for your troubles.
What about the thing with the lips?
Ajin called out, waving all four of her hands in the air.
The kissing thing! The thing they showed the Nimiki.
Ah, yes, Miss Rummicky said, and this time she let a smile crawl along her face openly. It was a hard thing to forget, Caden teaching her about kissing, and it had been an enlightening study. This is a purely human phenomenon, though it could be considered also a Nimiki one as well after tutelage from human smugglers. Yorpal may nuzzle their cheeks together and the Poit may touch their brows together to those they love. But humans kiss. A slide showing a male and a female human kissing came up on the slide, and Miss Rummicky gestured to it. Kissing is the action of pressing the lips to a part of the body, and this is considered the third human language. A kiss to the cheek is friendly. A kiss to the forehead is considered a way to show care, but the rest of the body has an entire manual of arms when it comes to a kiss. Miss Rummicky pointed to her own lips. A kiss here means one thing, and one thing only. A human likes you. You need to be careful here when dealing with humans, as like their fingers, their lips are also considered a biological weapon. There have been visible reactions to a human kiss, even on monitoring devices, and scholars believe that humans use pathokinesis as they kiss someone. It can calm you, excite you, seduce you, and even make you fight harder than you ever thought you could. The most common form of a kiss is a loving kiss, a way the human shows their affection for you, despite what you might think. There is also a timer.
A timer?
A male Poit cried out, his face incredulous.
This is a whole other language, and there is a timer?
Miss Rummicky giggled. Yes, a timer. A quick kiss, Moi, as they call it, has no further connotations. It is a simple display. However, should you linger more than a second, you begin unlocking different pathways as the human pathokinesis begins to form. If you or the human lingers, they will then turn their head to the left or right as if working a key, and the lips will then combine. You are now working past locks and can be considered in combat. If either combatant pull away here, it can be considered flirtatious and teasing. However, should you keep the lips together at this point, humans will then rotate their head again, pushing past the third lock. They may hug you, wrap their arms around you, and at times may even press their tongue into your mouth.
Ew!
A male opticon spluttered, feathers rustling with distaste. Don't knock it till you try it. Miss Rimiki thought to herself, but continued on. In a form of dominance, and you are now considered to be in the opening moments of a coupling. Should, say for instance, either party pull away, the human will likely be angry or irritated. This is in part due to you showing dominance on the human, or human to another human, and trying to control the situation. I am not joking you when I say human courting and coupling is like combat to them. There is dominance, submissiveness, and tally-keeping even here.
I suppose they could also be angry because it's kind of a buzzkill,
Tintle said, having been resting her chin on her arms the entire time and watching Miss Rimiki speak with great interest. You get the engines all fueled up for nothing. Even ships hate that. A male Carlican spoke up next. Is it true about the wrestling? There was a murmur of giggles and chuckles around the room, and Miss Rimiki's heart kicked up a few notches in her chest. Human coupling is vigorous. Their strength is on full display here, Miss Rimiki said coolly despite her massive heart thundering her ribcage. As all of you know, the members of the Confederation, as well as other spacefaring races, treat mating as a polite requirement of reproduction. Sometimes it is even faceless depending on the planet. Instead, being a deposit of genetic material, the Huguin of the Shashout Ring have left behind physical mating and even birth, instead growing their young in great nurseries. Humans do not believe in this. Their mating is as ferocious as their prowess in combat, and they judge each other during it as well. Should a partner be lazy or lackluster, they are passed over. Scholars have noted that entire marriages have fallen apart due to one of the humans becoming devoid of effort, in which the other human goes and seeks a better partner. Before any of you ask, no, I will not be showing you any aspects of human mating on the display. We will only speak about it. There was a collective annoyed groan that was quickly snapped off when Miss Rimiki turned, poising her fronds. Humans, Miss Rimiki began again, keeping her fronds pointed at her class, bite, claw, and muscle each other during their mating, though it can run the gambit of being either feral, salacious, or intimate. It has been called horrifyingly violent by some scholars, while others have viewed it as charming and pure by others. Death is a common occurrence in human mating, and there is a warning to you all with it. Humans, both male and female, have accidentally broken and killed other races who have tried coupling with them. Again, I must impress upon you that humans are heavy creatures, capable of strength that you have no idea of, and will accidentally kill you, even during mating if you are not careful. That is not to mention that none of us have any defenses against human diseases passed via mating, and hundreds of star citizens have died with a quickness. Syphilis so far has a record of killing a point within 3 days of infection. Left untreated, humans can survive it for up to 20 years. If you are still doubting the ruggedness of humans, they have already been recorded catching both Tyhax Wayne and the Wandering Flesh.
How long did they of taking to die?
A female opticon asked. They didn't, Miss Rimiki said flatly. Their bodies chewed up the disease, then spat it back out with no ill effects. Now, let's circle back to their musculature. I'll think you'll find some things about their hand bones and elbows quite curious, such as their ability to use them as crushing weapons in a pinch. Freryn stood there in front of Specialist Rayburn's living quarters. She had checked and double-checked the regulations, and as long as both parties were within 3 ranks of each other, they could mingle without the need for further paperwork. She checked and double-checked both the state of her mustard yellow fur and uniform as well, then to the small bag she was holding. She had been told human women liked sweet things, so she had pilfered the commissary for some snacks and drinks they could enjoy during their movie night, in which they would just hang out on the bed, eat snacks, talk, and then go on their way after the movie. Frerin had already done this with Corporal Raddock, the male human having been quite pleased when he opened the sliding hatch door and seen Frerin standing there with a cooler of beer. It had been a fun time, and they had shared some laughs at the movie, but Frerin wanted to see if both male and female humans were the same after hours. As she pressed the hailing button and stood back, she tilted her head as she thought. Male humans weren't bad, but they just weren't as pretty as the females. Female humans had hair that was more fun, had far more pleasing features, and she just didn't understand what the other female Yorple were on about when it came to male humans. The door slid up with a hiss of actuators, and Specialist Rayburn was standing there, all smiles, wearing a pair of jogging shorts and a white tank top that did nothing to hide her tanned skin and well-muscled limbs. "You came over wearing your uniform? We're off rotation for the next 4 weeks, unless it's an emergency, you know?" Special Rayburn teased, then stepped back to allow Frerin in. "Come on in, you dork. I found an old digital copy of Mulan. I think you'll like it." She didn't understand why, but Frerin's heart was beating a lot faster than usual as Specialist Rayburn gave her an odd look, and she could feel her tail wagging behind her. "All right. Is it a war movie?" Kinda," Specialist Rayburn said with a giggle, then closed the hatch behind Frerin.